emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Fox from Model Making Guru here. Hello and welcome to another quick tutorial video. Now, what am I going to be showing you today? Well, today I'm going to show you how to airbrush with bog standard Citadel paints. Not the Citadel Air paints, which are designed for airbrush, but the normal paints that are as thick as anything. Now, if you see here, this is my Mortarian. He's all in sub-assemblies and he's ready for painting. He's been primed in the Chaos Black primer and some UMP grey primer on the wings. Now, I didn't have a can of the Death Guard Green rattle can primer when I came to prime this guy. Most of him is actually Death Guard Green, and it would make a lot of sense to prime him with that rather than the black. The situation I've got now is he's primed in black, and I've got an option of basically brush painting Death Guard Green all over him and all the little nurglings and all the other bits and bobs. I really can't be bothered doing that because there's so many fine details on this guy. It's going to take forever to get round all those with any kind of brush, and because I'll be using all different sizes brushes to get into all the recesses, it's going to take a few coats and it's probably going to lose some of that detail. I don't really want to do that. I want to keep things fast. So I've got two choices. I can either stump up the cash for a can of Death Guard Green, or I can use a pot of Death Guard Green that I've actually already got. I actually got this free from one of them Warhammer things. So I could spend, what is it, 12 to 16 quid on a can of Death Guard Green? Yeah, maybe not, because if you're like me and you're working on a really tight budget, which I am right now, I can't afford a can of Death Guard Green. So that's not an option. So what I'm going to do instead is use the things I've already got. I've got a pot of Death Guard Green. I've got an airbrush. I'm going to get everything ready and I'll show you how you can use the normal paints in your airbrush. Okay, so I've got the scruffy cutting mat out because we're going to be mixing some paints. So what do you need? Well, you don't need much. You obviously need to paint. You will need something to mix in. I have a small plastic shot glass here. You can get these for £1 from the pound shop. I've just got a pack of 40 of them. You will need a brush, maybe something to stir with, a stirry stick of some sort, doesn't matter what it is. You will need, optional, is a pipette. This is a cheap plastic disposable pipette that I'll throw away as soon as I've used it. Just easy for transferring paint to the airbrush from the cup, but you don't need it because you can just pour. So that's optional. There is one other thing you'll need to thin these paints, and that is, of course, thinners. Now, pay attention, these are water-based acrylics. They're not lacquers, they're not solvent-based, they're water-based acrylics, similar to Ammo by Mig or Vallejo paints and lots of other brands like that. They're water-based, so you can thin them with a number of different things. When you're airbrushing, you don't really want to thin them with water because it'll change the way they work. They won't work the way they're supposed to work. It'll affect the way they dry and the surface tension on the plastic, and it'll just look minging. So don't thin them with water. It won't work really very well. Don't thin them with lacquer thinners or thinners designed for oil paints, enamel paints or lacquer paints. Lacquer thinners might work, but it's 50-50. They might not. They might have adverse effects and react really weirdly, and you'll get some very strange effects. To keep things simple, just use basic acrylic thinners. So for example, you can use, I happen to have here some Ultimate Airbrush Thinner. This is good for any acrylic paint. AK Interactive do their own, Ammo by Meg do their own. Most paint manufacturers do their own thinners, so look for acrylic thinners. They're usually alcohol based. Acrylic thinners, I've got the UMP ones here. Tamiya X20A is also a very good thinner for these paints. If you haven't got any of that, you can use good old IPA. IPA is isopropyl, ignore this label, it's not that. Isopropyl alcohol. In America it's known as rubbing alcohol or 99% rubbing alcohol. It's basically just denatured alcohol. It will work absolutely fine with these water-based paints. Don't use mineral spirits, don't use anything like that that's designed for oils or enamels. It won't work with these paints. So what we're going to do, dead easy. What you need to do, and you can change which way you want to do it. You basically want to mix your thinners and your paint. So what I shall do first is I shall get some thinners in an amount, I think probably how much I'll need. So I might need, say, that much paint. That'll be a good couple of airbrushfuls. It's more than I probably need. And all I need to do now is get my paint, give it a good shake. Get that over there. And then just basically start transferring paint from the paint pot to the thinner pot. Okay, and there we go. That is now a lot thinner. You can do a test on the side of the vessel you've stirred it in and just see if it runs down nice and thinly like that. That tells you it's about the right thickness. Again, it's the consistency you're looking for is about the consistency of skimmed milk. There's no hard and fast scientific number. People will say, well, what's the ratio of paint to thinner and this to that? And it's like, don't think like that, because all you do is lead yourself down a blind alley. Ideally, just work on the basis of the consistency of skimmed milk, and that's as complicated as it needs to be. Now, if I was just airbrushing this without filming, I'd just do it straight from here. I'd mount this on a bit of blue tack so it didn't fall over, and I'd pipette it into my airbrush. Because I'm filming, it takes a little bit of time. I have to go back and do camera stuff. So I'm going to transfer it to a dropper bottle, which is a cheap plastic disposable dropper bottle. And I'm going to transfer it into here, like this, you'll see. And so here we are in the spray booth. You can see here I've transferred the paint to a dropper bottle, purely because I'm doing stuff off camera between shots, so it would have been sat around for 20 minutes in a cup by now and dried out. Now, whenever you mix your own paints and colours and thin things, it's important you shake the living crap out of them before you put them in the airbrush, just because there's a higher chance that things will have separated out before you put them into the brush. So make sure that you do shake them really, really well. Now, I could sit here and start telling you about pressures and setting the needle and the chuck and everything else, but to be honest, there's no point whatsoever doing that. Why? Because the whole spraying setup depends 100% on your airbrush, your compressor, the size of the nozzle, the length of the hose, whether the compressor has a tank, and you have to add into that the fact that you've mixed your own custom paint with its own custom thinness. There's no way to predict what pressure and what setting that will need. So the only thing I can suggest is when you've got your mixed paint, your nice thinned paint in the airbrush, although I don't do it here, before you go straight in and start putting paint onto the model, do a few little test sprays on a scrap bit of paper or card or plastic card or whatever you've got just lying around, just to make sure it's not too thick or too thin, or you don't have to adjust the pressure. You will need to experiment and vary the pressure, vary the how far the needle is locked back, if that's an option on your airbrush. You'll need to adjust that a little bit. You'll need to tweak the PSI. Like I say, I think when I was doing this, I varied it between about 17 and 15 PSI because I was finding my feet, finding the right setting for this thinness of paint. So you will need to experiment. Don't just put it straight in and start spraying, because yes, you may have a perfect mix, but it might be too thin or it might be too thick. You don't know till you start spraying it. So I can't give you any advice about pressures or anything else. There's no point. So just experiment, and then when you're happy that it's flowing like you want, go straight in and start painting. And when you do spray, don't blap it on all at once. I've said this before to you. Do a thin misty coat first as a key coat, and then apply more thin misty coats as you go. I've found the best finish you can get with these paints is to just go in thin misty coats and build it up slowly. A lot of reasons for that. One, you get a nice smooth surface, you get a nice smooth finish. You can also take advantage of, if you've done like me, a black primer underneath, you can take advantage of that and start trying to work on some kind of shading by building up thicker paint in some areas and not so much in others. So thin misty coats, do some experimenting before you go in, and you should be good as gold. Violins, there we go. Everything that I wanted to be green is now Death Guard green, and it was dead easy. I also went over the wings with some ceramite white just to get them ready for what I need to do with them later. But that is it, and how easy was that? One other advantage of doing it this way, apart from the fact it's a lot cheaper and it's dead easy, is that you can get some shading effects. If you do like I did and go over in thin misty coats, you can apply more paint to certain surfaces and less paint to others, and you'll get a shading effect. Under the arms, for example, is a little bit darker because I put less paint under there than I did on the top. So there you go, you can get nice simple shading effects. Now, there are some things to be aware of course, with this technique. It's very easy, but it does have one disadvantage. The paint you've applied is very, very thin now, and it's very easily removed with handling while you're painting the rest of it. So just go easy as you're painting the rest. Be gentle with your model. Try and hold it by the base or your stand or anything like that, rather than just grabbing the figure if you can avoid it, just because it's only a thin layer of paint and it's very easily removed. If you wanted to, you could go over with a matte coat now just to seal that in and make sure you didn't rub it off. But if you do rub any off, just touch it with the brush later, no problem. So just to recap, yes, you can spray Citadel regular paints. There are specific air paints, as in paints designed for airbrushes from Citadel, but they still come in the silly Citadel pot. They're not in dropper bottles and they're not particularly practical. So if you've already got a pot of a end colour that you need, use that. Just remember, you'll need to thin it a bit more than a regular paint. They are thicker because they are designed purely for brush painting. So you need to thin it more than any other kind of paint. Also, don't forget to make sure you're using the right thinners. Don't just stick any old thinners in there. Don't use water or anything like that. Don't use mineral spirits or anything designed for enamels or oil paints or lacquers. Make sure you're using good acrylic paint thinners. So anything that's either alcohol based, like isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol, Tamir X20A, things like that. You've got the Medea thinners from Iwata. You've got AK Interactive thinners. You've got Ammo by MIG thinners. Most paint brands have their own thinners, so just make sure you're using the right thinners, typically alcohol based or designed specifically for water based paints. Don't just use water, and don't use thinners for other kinds of paints. Go slowly and build the paint up in thin misty layers. That way, if you want some kind of cool shading effects, you can get them, but it also means you're not going to go horribly wrong and get runs and dribbles if you've mixed the paint a little bit too thick or a bit too thin and you've got the pressure a bit too wrong. Just, it's a much easier way of doing it. And that's it. That's all you need to know. So yes, you can spray them. Yes, it's dead easy. And yes, it's dead handy. So thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Don't forget, as always, do go and join the Model Makers Boom Hut, facebook.com/groups/model boom hut. Best group on the internet for model making. You'll get loads of advice and help from there. Lots of people will be your friends. So go and join it. And don't forget, of course, as always, if you want to help support this channel, you're more than welcome to pop along to patreon.com/model making guru and see if you'd like to help keep this channel going. So until next time, take care of yourselves, go make something awesome, go be awesome. Yes, you there, go be awesome. Adios amoebas.